Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be reacting to the deadliest weapons in World War III. So let's get into it. This is going to be an interesting one.
The date is November 2nd, 2021. The world economy has at last begun to recover from the coronavirus outbreak. But as nations begin to open up again, one country is determined to reshape the new world order in its own image. For 3 weeks, China has been building its forces for a cross-strait invasion into Taiwan. Given its still limited mobility fleet and extreme currents of the Strait of Taiwan, China has a very narrow window to secure a beachhead only twice a year, and the Chinese Communist Party is no longer willing to wait for peaceful reunification. In response to the military buildup, the United States has responded in kind, moving a sizable portion of its Atlantic fleet to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Bases in Hawaii, Australia, Alaska, and Japan all bustle with activity, as thousands of aircraft are shuttled to airfields closer to the potential conflict zone. Guam, linchpin of the U.S. operations in South Pacific, is on full alert. At 0124 hours, China launches the first salvo of World War III. Overhead, American spy satellites pick up the unmistakable thermal plumes of hundreds of ballistic missiles lifting off launch vehicles and silos all across eastern China. Much of these missiles smash into neighboring Taiwan, but a number of them reach space and then readjust their trajectories. Guided by Chinese satellites and ground control stations, Chinese DF-26 ballistic missiles, otherwise known as Guam killers, perform course correction burns before re-entering the atmosphere, packing a warhead loaded with over 3,000 pounds of explosives. Each missile is a deadly threat to a target on the ground. American Aegis cruisers immediately launch volleys of ballistic missile interceptors, seeking to destroy the Chinese missiles while still outside the atmosphere. American THAAD, or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Units stationed in both South Korea and Guam, send their own volleys of interceptors. But the DF-26 missiles carry countermeasures and scatter radar-confusing chaff and decoys as they cruise just outside of the atmosphere and prepare to enter their terminal phase. American interceptors destroy many missiles, but many more slip past the first layer of defense. Now entering the atmosphere, Patriot missile defense batteries stationed on Guam fire interceptors in droves. More missiles are killed, but just half a minute later, over a dozen DF-26 missiles prepare for impact. 4 of the missiles split open, showering American runways with runway cratering munitions. The rest smash into important fuel and munition storage facilities or strike at barracks and plane hangars. The DF-26 missiles aren't exactly precise. They have a target radius of just under 100 meters, but with over 3,000 pounds of explosives, they don't.
Whoa, just 1 second. Is your business trying to
This show getting
complete
interesting right now.
strangers?
Don't need to be. In seconds, Guam is a smoking ruin, and a significant portion of U.S. Pacific military might has just been neutralized. Out at sea, however, the DF-26 targeting American carrier strike groups don't fare as well. If China's going to have any chance of winning the war, the American carriers need to be destroyed, and have been secondary in priority only to Guam. The American carriers have been sailing at full steam, though, and performing erratic maneuvers. The 2 powerful nuclear reactors aboard the Nimitz carriers push the massive ships to top speeds that have to this day remained classified, easily outrunning their escorts, but for their erratic maneuvers meant to throw off the D-26's targeting. The strike group's defenses open up on the big missiles, with its accompanying cruisers firing off volley after volley of interceptors. Most of the DF-26s are downed, but a near miss cripples the Ronald Reagan and forces it to return to the American West Coast for extensive repairs. A direct hit on the bow of the Abraham Lincoln devastates the massive carrier. Within 2 hours, the giant ship and its accompanying 80 combat aircraft and thousands of sailors are all lying at the bottom of the sea. The U.S. has just suffered more casualties in the first 3 hours of World War III than in 20 years of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, it's America's turn to strike back. Chinese missile strikes have devastated American and allied nation bases across the Pacific, from Guam to Japan, and as far south as Australia. America's first counterattack doesn't come from a kinetic weapon, but from an electronic one. Malicious code lurking in Chinese computer systems for years comes to life with a single keystroke, and suddenly Chinese communications and intelligence networks are brought to a screeching halt. China is shocked at the electronic devastation of the attack, and at the lackluster performance of what it had hoped would be a digital.
See, I like his videos because it be out there. Like, cause it's all theories now. None of this, like, is really, nobody really know. But they be out there, though. His reaches be out there, though. That's why I like his videos.
Digital Pearl Harbor against the U.S. Chinese government hackers are only just now discovering that the computer systems they've been painstakingly penetrating over the course of years have largely been simulated. Anticipating a massive cyber attack in the case of war, the US has spoofed many of its own critical military computer networks and allowed foreign powers to believe their software was penetrating real networks being used by real people. These fake networks are so detailed that they even simulate individual workers' browsing history. Chinese hackers can watch as personnel waste time on YouTube and playing their favorite flash games, yet it's all fake, simulated by AI. But the electronic attack is quickly followed by a very real kinetic attack. On the long-range radar, Chinese air defense installations watch American B-2 bombers on approach.
They really be out there. Love these videos, yeah.
The stealthy planes can't evade radar completely, and intermittent contacts betray their presence while still hundreds of miles from the Chinese coast. However, knowing the stealth bombers are somewhere out there and getting a target lock is a totally different thing, and high-frequency targeting radars can't resolve a good lock on the incredibly stealthy bombers. Featuring upgraded stealth composites and an exhaust system that cools the hot air of the twin turbojets powering the big bombers, the B-2s penetrate even deeper toward Chinese territory. Fighter jets are scrambled to intercept the attack craft, but while still hundreds of miles away, the B-2s let loose with their payloads. Each B-2 briefly flashes brightly on the radar as its cargo bay doors are opened and then quickly closed, restoring its stealth characteristics. Then, the big planes turn around and head for surviving friendly airfields. From the belly of each plane, half a dozen large missiles fall toward the Pacific Ocean. Rocket engines come to life as the missiles fall to just a few hundred feet off the waves, and each missile levels off at just over 50 feet over the breaking waves. The missiles feature stealthy characteristics, making them very difficult to track and target with interceptors, and terrain-following radar allows them to skim just above the waves so as to remain under the horizon of Chinese radar. As the missiles accelerate to twice the speed of sound, the rocket engines suddenly cut off and are jettisoned, and the missile's main mode of propulsion, a scramjet, flares to life. The scramjet has no moving parts and works by compressing incoming air from the nose of the missile and injecting fuel into the superheated air, which instantly ignites. However, each missile has to be helped along to supersonic speed before the scramjets can engage. But once they do, the missiles punch forward until they're moving at thousands of miles an hour. The missiles arrive at their targets across the Chinese coast. They roar over population centers to reach military buildup zones, air bases, and command and control nodes. Upon reaching their targets, the missiles suddenly plunge to the ground, causing only minor destruction on impact. However, for miles around each missile's final descent, all electronics have been permanently disabled. The US has just crippled thousands of Chinese vehicles, command and control nodes, ships, aircraft, and computers with electromagnetic pulse weapons. Not a single Chinese soldier has died in the attack, but immeasurable damage has been done to Chinese logistics and military infrastructure. A few days later, the surface war to push the US out of the Pacific has finally begun in earnest. Chinese Type 055 and 052 destroyers are punching well above their weight class against American ships. The Chinese destroyers are newer than their American counterparts, many of which have begun to show their age. The Type 55 and 52s are fast, precise, and lethal with their arsenal of anti-ship cruise missiles and inflict heavy losses on American ships. They're supported by a range of bases built across the South China Sea, each one of which is home to dozens of missile batteries, combat aircraft, and long-range surveillance radar. Despite its carrier strike groups largely intact, the U.S. can't penetrate the outer ring of Chinese Pacific defenses without a dedicated concentration of firepower. Until the South China Sea artificial reef bases are neutralized, it'll be weeks before the U.S. Navy can bring the fight to China's shores. In the meantime, speedy and agile Chinese destroyers seek out U.S. and allied ships that stray too close, supported by aircraft flying out of the reclaimed island bases China has spent 2 decades building, while the world just watched. Under the waves, however, the United States has let loose its fleet of terrifying underwater predators. American attack submarines have been more prepared for this fight than the rest of the U.S. Navy, pre-positioned along critical waterways for months at a time thanks to their nuclear reactors, which provide them with unlimited endurance. It's only the crew's need to eat that limits the sub's endurance, but a whole fleet of fast resupply vessels keeps America's silent service well supplied at war, and the deadly subs back on target. American Virginia and Los Angeles class submarines have begun hunting Chinese subs since the war began. By far, their most difficult prey is the stealthy Type 39A, a submarine so advanced it caught U.S. intelligence completely by surprise. The advantage, however, remains firmly on the U.S. side. as China's anti-submarine warfare capabilities continue to lag significantly behind the U.S. Lacking air and surface assets to hunt down American subs, the quiet nuclear-powered subs methodically search for the Chinese diesel-electric subs. After losing 3 subs to the American fleet, the Chinese have ordered their own subs close to support bases. The Chinese subs' main mission, after all, is to attack American surface ships, and they're still being kept at bay by the massive People's Liberation Army rocket force. However, this leaves the U.S. Silent Service free to hunt across the South Pacific, and dozens of Chinese ships are either sunk or crippled in attacks. Some American subs are lost, but the Virginia-class subs prove even more difficult to locate and sink than Los Angeles-class, featuring a new generation of noise-canceling rubber tiles and equipment built with tolerances tighter than even spacecraft. The Virginia-class submarines are deadly predators and send many People's Liberation Army Navy ships to the bottom of the ocean. The war, however, remains at an impasse at the moment. Until China's South China Sea bases can be neutralized, the U.S. can't bring its own considerable naval and air power to bear, let alone begin the reconquest and liberation of Taiwan. What has become extremely clear to both sides, however, is that the most important weapons of what will become World War III are, for the first time in history, exclusively weapons that operate in the cyber, space, and naval warfighting realms. Now, go check out US vs. China 2020.
That was a good video. I really liked it. His theories be out there, though. But if y'all like this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.
Heard them lasers talking now that we don't pay that no mind. Didn't need to watch and know that I be hearing no.